have never desired your good opinion.
People fear what they do not understand.
I have a headache, a badge, and a gun.
Power is yours.
Behave.
I was just trying to start a conversation.
And share the wonders I've seen.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man, I got todo que el spider can. That's the beginning of the Spider-Man song, pero en español. Because why? Today we are talking about Sony's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Hello, and welcome back to The Wonders I've Seen, where there's no such thing as weird or normal, solamente es diferente. I'm your host, Tanagra, and today we'll be discussing all the spider peoples. My liquid nourishment for the day is hot water with lemon because my voice is dry and it's cold outside. So I'm just trying to stay warm and hydrated. So sit back, enjoy the wonders, and let's talk about the spider people. First, I have to say, if you have not seen this movie, go out and see it. I mean, I don't know how many awards a film needs to win, so you think it's valid for you to spend your money, which I understand. But just let me list a few of the awards this film has won. So, Academy Awards, it's nominated for Best Animated Feature Film, which it should win. But it already won the Golden Globes Best Motion Picture Animated, BAFTA Best Animated Feature Film, African American Film Critics Association, uber important, Best Animated Feature, Alliance of Women Film Journalists, also uber important, Best Animated Feature Film, Best Animated Female for Haley Stanfield, Gwen Stacy, aka The Spider-Gwen, amazing character. Also won American Cinema Editors USA winner, Best Edited Animated Feature Film. It's beautiful. You should watch it so you can appreciate the wonderful award-winning editing. Also won the Annie Awards, several there, but Best Animated Feature, just to start out with the 7 awards it won there. Art Directors Guild, nominated for Best Animated Feature. And then we get into all the other ones. Literally, this could keep going. But several that are minority-based awards, and that includes racial as well as gender. Several just from other professionals in the field being like, y'all are awesome! And then several from like even old white people who vote too much. We don't need to call those out though. So go watch this movie. It is brilliant. You will have all the fucking feels. I mean, all right. So in case you're not familiar with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is Sony's latest animated installation in the Spider-Man film universe. It centers around Miles Morales, voiced by Shameik Moore, who is a Latinx growing up in the Bronx. I think he's supposed to be about 15, maybe 16 years old. And what happened when his universe and the universes of several other Spider-Men collide into one, or rather, I should say, spider people. We have the washed up, divorced, wide waistline Peter Parker, voiced by Jake Johnson, the uber cool emo, I'm still suffering from losing my best friend Peter Parker. Sorry, that's a spoiler if you haven't read the comics. Spider-Gwen, voiced by Haley Steinfeld, the uber violent black and white Spider-Man Noir, voiced by Nicolas Cage, which was a brilliant casting decision. In all honesty, all of these are. The Spider-Ham / Looney Tunes-esque. I'm not sure if he's actually a Looney Tunes character, but Spider-Ham, I believe he is, voiced by John Mulaney. And then our nod to Marvel's Japanese animation studios with Penny Parker, voiced by Kimiko Glenn. Our villains are equally well cast, with Lee Shriver playing Kingpin, and then Catherine Hahn, love her, playing an evil scientist. And I won't tell you which one, because if you haven't seen the film, that will be a spoiler. But they're all evil scientists, so that shouldn't give anything away. Yeah. So the story is a wonderful combination. The writers did an excellent job. Lord and Miller, you're probably familiar with them from 21 Jump Street. They did an excellent job of mashing together all of the different, not only the spider people and that are out in the comic books right now in print, but also of all the films. They give several nods to Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland's Spider-Man. And then they sort of all lead up to Miles Morales becoming Spider-Man. And they know that we already know how this happened, so they don't waste a lot of time on it. The only one you really get in depth is Miles Morales' story and how he becomes Spider-Man. And it's pretty important because his whole thing is going through it alone. And even though he has his family, how he deals with it, the transitions of just becoming Spider-Man at the same time that he's a teenager, at the same time, the changing relationship with his parents, and also that he's going from one school, his old neighborhood school, to, I'm not sure if it's magnet or private. I don't really know how they call those in New York, but basically a school that he had to test into. And so it's a little bit, it's not quite as relaxed as old public school. He doesn't know the kids as well. And although he's smart enough to be there, like, he doesn't actually want to be there because he likes what he knows and his friends, and he's just not interested. But his parents are very insistent that he go, and so he goes. And this is sort of the world that we're dropped into. New York, Black Latinx, a highly intelligent young man, and what happens when, like, he's just trying to be your everyday kid and the spider bites you. Now, this sounds like your standard Spider-Man story, right? Except the culture is so important, and it's so subtly put in, and they don't even make a big deal of it because Miles is Latinx, but there's not flags flying out of the window. Like, in all honesty, there are in a lot of Latinx New York homes. It's things like his mom speaking to him in Spanish, him speaking to her in Spanish. The food that they eat in the morning, they're eating arroz con habichuelas, I believe. And then when he's at school, he switches back and forth between the two fluently. And they make a point not to be like, he's like, oh, this person he's speaking into this way. Like, there's no difference. He's just talking to his friends, saying hi, giving bumps and daps. Do the kids say daps? I don't know if they say that anymore, but we're going to say daps. And you get this real sense of what it means to, like, not only live in New York, but to be Latinx in New York, that it's not a dual identity so much as an integration and an encompassing of both. And that's the thing that I feel you see throughout this entire film is the idea of the integration of things that are different, of people that are different, of, in the case of the spider people, of species that are different when you have spider ham. So as one thing that sort of got me was that as much as I love this film, and I do highly recommend that you go see it. Take your family, take your friends, take your aunts, take your uncles, take your everybody to see this film. One thing that I really, really love, but also that got me, was the relationship between Spider-Man and the police. It's a little bit of a spoiler, but there's this moment at the very beginning where Miles, while he's walking from his old school to his new school, he's running down the street and he's putting his stickers up on everything because he's actually a graffiti artist. It's one of the things that his defining characteristics he's a creative, which I thought was an excellent take on the idea of Peter Parker taking pictures. Miles Morales, he draws what he sees. And as he's putting up one sticker, he falls and the cop car comes up and it beeps. And all I could think was stop and frisk. Oh my God, this young black boy, what is going to happen to him? Like, because that is my initial reaction. And I don't know if Lord and Miller were aware of how the Black audience would react when they saw this. But it definitely plays on you. Like, I stopped for a second and I was like, wait, this is supposed to be a family-friendly film, but at the same time, there can still be racism and hate and police violence. Like, that's what my mind did. And then it turns out to be his father. And I think it was a calculated move to have his father be a policeman in this day and age, given our political and social atmosphere. And not necessarily a bad one, but definitely a calculated one. And you can say it might be the same in the comic books, or it's inspired by this version or this verse or whatever. And I don't disagree with that. But we all know at this point that what's in the comic books does not have to be in the film. So I thought it was interesting that they have that. And at first I was uncertain about it, like what type of comment are they trying to make? What type of political statement are they trying to make? But by the end, there is an understanding not between Miles, who we all know as Spider-Man, and the police, who are sort of represented and encompassed in his father, but it's between Spider-Man and the police. The idea that the police can learn something from somebody else, the idea that the police can change or adapt or be open-minded, that they don't always know what's right, and that their job is to protect us, not necessarily to prosecute us. And you see that moment where the father gets angry about something and it's like, oh, it has to be Spider-Man. Spider-Man's the villain. And you also watch that process where he recognizes that he could be wrong. And I thought that that was a very good way to use a character who's a policeman, and just sort of sending its own message, that, yeah, your job is to be here to protect, to serve, that we recognize that you have families that you love and that the job is dangerous. But at the same time, like, we're not all the villain. We're not all anti-policemen. So I thought that was a pretty good use of something that I was not very certain about at the beginning, because anytime you see somebody who's Black and you see a police car or even just a uniform, you instantly start to worry. And I think they did a decent job of not only making the father recognizable as like a human being, and also you empathize with him, but of also just as a police officer, how his relationship and his thoughts on Spider-Man progress throughout the film. So I don't feel like that's a spoiler, because like you learn it in the first maybe if 10 minutes of the film, and then on top of that, we already know that Miles is Spider-Man. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. Now back to all of our other Spider people. The casting of this was brilliant. The first Peter Parker we meet is like the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, perfectly fit. He meets Miles and he's like, "You're like me. I'll train you. We'll be friends. I'll be your mentor." And then we later find that he's been happily married to Mary Jane for like since they got out of high school almost. He's a highly successful scientist as well. Like, we learn that basically he is the perfect Spider-Man. And of course, my favorite thing about this is that they have him voiced by the ridiculously physically attractive, has yet to become problematic, knock on wood, Chris Pine. And then after that, the next Spider-Man that we meet, with the expanding waistline, sort of washed up, divorced because he didn't want to work hard enough or couldn't work hard enough at both his marriage and being Spider-Man, is Jake Johnson. And this is the Spider-Man who leads us through Miles's sort of transformation from just being like boy bit by spider to Spider-Man, which I'm always hesitant to call a 15-year-old a man, but it is the trademark term. So, yeah, it's an excellent sort of contrast between like this idea that you can be a superhero and have everything and have your personal life and have your professional life and have your superhero life and be great at it. And then this is too much shit. What the fuck? I'm tired. I don't know what to do. I can't handle all this. It's emotionally and physically taxing. And I love the dichotomy that we get with those two, and also how Miles responds to both. And he still looks to both of them for a certain level of leadership and help, because he doesn't know what he's doing. But they sort of present two different options for him. Like, look, this is how your life could go when you take on this mantle of Spider-Man, and you should be aware of it, that like it's not always going to go well. And right now you're young enough that you have an option. And I really appreciated that. Then in between these two very, very different Spider-Men, we get Spider-Gwen, who is also, she's the same age. I believe they clarify she's like a few months older than Miles. And she is in some ways probably like the most stable and grounded of all the spider beings that we meet. She's young, but she's gone through a lot. She's been fighting on her own. She's never had, you sort of get the sense that she's never had any support being a spider person, and her support was her friend Peter, and then he died. So you sort of feel that level of sadness, and she talks about not making any friends because she just didn't want to get hurt again. And you also see another option for Miles, like, this is how it could go. You could be fine, and right now you have your loving parents, you have your great relationship with your uncle, you have all of your good friends, you're starting at a new school, but you should be aware that once again, if you take on this mantle, there is loss. And this theme of loss and dealing in the, with great responsibility with great power comes great responsibility, is truly seen in every single spider being, even with Spider Ham, which I thought was excellently done, that he's a pig. He's basically a porky pig. And he's like pulling mallets out of his pocket and things like that, and like very like ridiculousness, but at the same time there's a point where he just like gets angry, and he's even talking about the sense of loss that he's felt. And I appreciated the fact that even the most ridiculous of the spider people also has to deal with loss, because ultimately that's what it means to be a superhero. I think that's sort of what it means to be a superhero, no matter who you're talking about. Even you're talking about uber awesome, perfect Captain America, you give up something to take on this mantle and take on these powers. So this idea of all the spider beings coming together to defeat Kingpin, to save each of their individual universes, is really played out in the fact that they've all experienced this sense of loss. And even if you're talking about who I believe is I'm not sure she's supposed to be the youngest, but she definitely comes off as the youngest, whether or not that's on purpose, I'm not sure. Penny Parker, to all the way up to Spider-Man Noir, to all the way to Spider Ham. Like, each of them has experienced this loss that made them into the spider being they are, and they sort of all represent different paths that Miles' life could now take, that he is a spider being as well. And there's this moment where you're not even sure Miles wants to do it. I mean, like, we know we're going to get a happy ending and Miles is going to be a kick-ass Spider-Man. Like, we know what's going to happen. But there's this moment where, like, just due to the really good writing and the fact that, you know what, he doesn't actually have to be. Like, maybe this will end with him being like, I want to be a spider person, but I'm not ready to take on this mantle right now. You're sort of doubting, like, if he's going to do it, if he wants to do it, because ultimately the level of loss that's inevitable with doing this is really heavy. And he's just 15, and they do a really good job of reminding you that Miles is a kid. Like, Penny doesn't, they sort of contrast, even though they're supposed to be the same age. Penny doesn't have that. She directly talks about not having family and friends because she doesn't want to get hurt again. And Miles still has that. He still has that choice to make. So I really loved that Miles can choose which path he wants to take, and they're sort of represented all the spider beings. And as an audience member, you can't help but recognize or empathize with every single one of them, what they've been through. Like, my friends and I have been doing Which Spider Person Are You? Because they're all so different, and even though they don't all get the same amount of screen time, they're fully fleshed out as an ensemble. Yes, it's Miles's movie, but you get to know each one of them, their stories, how they got to where they are, and in addition to them all being like different people and representing different paths that Miles could take, they also, and this is a nod to the animators and to the directors and to the producers, they also each are stylistically different, which I loved and thought was a brilliant choice. So each of them has a different style of animation. Each of them, when they speak, their speech bubbles are different. Their color palettes are different. And when they're all together, they're standing there, and while they're physically different, like also just visually, the contrast between each of the spider people is brilliantly done. And when their worlds collide, it's ugly and it's clashing, and it looks like musical notes that have clashed together into this horrible array of colors. But it's it still works. It's just it's visually stunning, and all it's horrible and destructive because, right, the clash of colors means that the universes are all colliding and therefore we're all gonna die, and so will all the spider people. It's just like the thought process that went into it is just genius. Like I don't think, I know they couldn't have done, maybe they could have. I don't think they could have done this movie IRL live action and not successfully have established each spider person, because even when they're telling their origin stories, they're all in the different animation from that verse. So I don't think they necessarily could have done it as well in live action, or if anything, it would have been really expensive or too expensive. They wouldn't have done it as well. So, and I appreciate the animation, but at the same time, I would have really loved to have seen a live action Miles Morales, a live action Spider-Gwen, a live action Penny Parker. Because all this time, Spider-Man is like the ultimate everyday hero. He's supposed to be the person that we can all be, the geeky kid loved by his family who becomes the hero, and then through great tragedy he decides to save the world. The only thing is that in every single version he's a white cis het male, and that's not the everyman. That's the default. Hollywood likes to act like that's the default. Fantasy books like to act like that's the default. Sci-fi books like to act like that's the default, although they've gotten better. But ultimately, white cis het male is the default, and he's supposed to stand in for all of us. And the truth is that he doesn't. Like, that's not the reality of it. So I love the fact that we have 3 spider people that aren't white cis het men. And I appreciate that they actually took the time to, once again, not only show the diversity in Miles' life and that Miles represents, but also the diversity among the spider characters. Because like our everyday hero shouldn't just be white, cis, het, and male. There's more diversity than that. This is my favorite Spider-Man film thus far, and I have seen all of them. I don't know why I tortured myself with that. But this is my favorite one thus far. It's not only portrays all of the spider people well and all the different universes that they come from well, but also the diversity that should exist in our superheroes. In all honesty, like, this is probably the most diverse we've gotten too. And I know people are going to talk about Black Panther, and I know people will talk about Wonder Woman, and maybe somebody will say Aquaman, but you know my thoughts on that. Listen to my previous episode. But they represent diversity in Hollywood overall, but not in one film. They don't represent an integration. And I think that that's what Spider-Man does really well. It shows integration in the different universes, in the different spider people. Even when we're just looking at Miles's world, whether it's his original, public school or the new fancy private science academy that he's tested into, integration is the really defining factor. Even when they're showing the streets of New York, not everybody is white, or like, quote unquote extras don't all look the same. And that's something that this film does really well. And I think that was an excellent choice, and not just choice, but also awareness on part of the creators. There's a reason why this film has won so many awards, and all of them are rightfully deserved. I will once again say, go watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It is the best Spider-Man film that we have had, with all of the various versions. And I'm not sure where they're going to go with this. They've just sort of been enjoying the laurels of the success that they've had thus far, which by all means I would too. This was a huge undertaking. Nobody really expected this film to do quite this well, or to be quite so changing on the superhero landscape. But I feel like there was a hint of a sequel at the end when we see Miles and Penny talking across the verses. And I love the idea of a sequel for this, but at the same time, I love the idea of seeing this live action, of having a white female Penny Parker, having a Black Latinx Miles Morales of having a, super genius Japanese Penny Parker all fighting together. I'm obviously not against Spider-Man Noir. I'm not against washed up Peter Parker, and I'm not against Spider-Ham. But I think seeing those three in live action would be amazing. And I'm torn if I want a live action or if I just want them to make another beautiful animated sequel. But we'll see what the studios decide. I was reading one review and they talked about one thing that they didn't like was that because this was animated, it sort of suggests the idea that in order for a superhero world to be diverse, it has to be fake. It has to be animated. It can't be the real world. And part of me feels the same way. And my hope is that because this was so successful, I mean, films that have diverse casts, being successful is not a new thing. In all honesty, they've done studies about this for so long. So that it was when it was in animation is just like, oh, we already knew this. So my hope, though, is that this will inspire other live action superheroes to be more integrated, to be more diverse, to recognize that you can have a diverse character and it can be part of who they are, but they don't have to be defined by it. Like you can just, it's just there and that's it. It's just who they are being every single day. So go see Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It's brilliant. That's all I can say. The animation's brilliant. The characters are brilliant. The voice acting's brilliant. It's a beautiful film. The story is brilliant. You will be crying, tearing up throughout it. You will be at the edge of your seat and in your feels. And you will love every single minute of it. So that's all the news that I have to share with you today. To continue discussion, you can find me on Twitter at Tanagra GGNOC. That's at TANAGRAGGNOC. For all of you Android users, like myself, you can find us at Anchor and RadioPublic. And for all you iThings users, also like myself, you can listen in on iTunes and Overcast. You can also listen to us while watching an awesome slideshow on YouTube. This one will probably just be a bunch of spider people swinging through the air because that was also some beautiful animation. Seriously, if you haven't seen this movie, go see it. If you can't go see it, I understand tickets are expensive. Then just Google Miles Morales Spider-Man and the part where he's swinging through the air. Trust me, it's worth it. I'll be doing random rabbit watches again, but they will be very, very random. When they happen, I'll tweet them out on my Twitter. Once again, that's at TanagraGGNOC. It'll be about shows, movies. If you have any suggestions, feel free to leave a message on any platform and let me know. If you have any book suggestions, feel free to tweet them at me. I do read a lot. I haven't talked about any of my reading on this podcast, but maybe I will. Thanks for joining. Make choices and remember, don't frolic up.